All right, so we're going to take a look here at number 16 from the week 5 homework. So the problem is as follows. We have 0.5 squared minus 0.3 squared, all divided by 0.005 plus zero point 0.1. All right, and our directions are to perform the indicated operations and round the result to the specified decimal place when indicated. And we're told here to round to the nearest hundredth. We'll have to keep that in mind at the very end of the problem. All right, so anytime that you are evaluating expressions, guys, whenever you read those instructions, we immediately need to think order of operations. We need to make sure that we go through and we perform these operations in the proper order. All right, so the little word trick that we can use here to remember the order of operations is PEMDAS. And remember that that tells you that your order should be parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, and subtract. All right, so let's go through and let's see what we end up getting as we go through our order of operations here, starting off with parentheses. So notice, guys, that you do have a couple of parentheses. So that means you need to take care of everything inside of those parentheses first. Well, if you look inside of those parentheses, we cannot do anything. There's no simplification to be done. All we have in this parentheses is the number 0.5, and all we have in this parentheses is the number 0.3. So we cannot evaluate either of those parentheses any further. So we're ready to move on to the next order. And in this case, that is our exponents. If we have any exponents, we need to go ahead and take those exponents, to whichever powers they need to be taken to. So in this case, we have 0.5 squared. All right, so you're taking the number 0.5 and raising it to the second power, and we have 0.3 squared. So we're going to have to take 0.3 and raise it to the second power as well. So remember, all that's telling you guys is how many times you're going to multiply a number to itself. So we need to take 0.5 and we need to multiply it to itself twice. So we need to multiply that by 0.5, and let's see what we get. So we get 0.25. So we have 0. Excuse me, erase that. There we go, 0.25. Let's see if I can get this right here. All right, we're back on track. 0.25. All right, so we got a little messed up there. So just so we know what we did, we just took 0.5 squared and got 0.25. All right, so that was 0.5 squared. We're going to subtract that from, we have 0.3 squared. Let's go ahead and do that. So we're taking 0.3 and we're going to multiply it to itself twice. So 0.3 times 0.3 is 0.09. We have 0.09. And this is going to all be divided by 0.005. It's going to kind of be annoying to write again. I apologize. 0.005 plus 0.1. Okay, so now we are ready to move on to our next piece. Remember, we already took care of all of the parentheses. All right, so notice that I still have these two sets of parentheses here. All right, and that's just kind of to separate these two numbers. If you kind of look down here, this looks a little bit jumbled. So you might see someone, if there are longer decimals, put parentheses around this number just to designate, hey, I am adding these two numbers to each other, right? You're going to have your operation in between them. I'm taking this number plus this number. All right, so we took care of all the parentheses. We took care of all the exponents. All right, and now if you look through and ask yourself, is there any multiplication? No, there's no multiplication to do. But is there any division? All right, and you'll see that yes, in fact, there is division, right? Notice that we're going to eventually have to take this numerator and divide it by this denominator. So this is going to be where a lot of us are going to maybe slip up, because we're going to go through our order of operations and say, hey, we need to divide next. But what we need to remember, guys, is that division is when you're going to take some number, let's call it A, and divide it by some number, let's call it B. All right, you need to have one number divided by another number. So what this really means is that we should be treating the numerator of our expression and the denominator of our expression as a single number value. All right, and in order to see it as a single number value, basically what we're going to do is we're going to throw some parentheses around it just to say, hey, everything that you see here inside of this blue bracket, it's going to represent a single number value. Yes, we still do need to subtract these two numbers, but once we do that, all we're going to be left with is a single number in our numerator. And the same thing is true down here in our denominator. So in other words, once you get to this point, we're actually right back here. We have a couple of parentheses that we need to take care of. We actually need to completely simplify this numerator and this denominator before we can do the division, which is this horizontal bar right here. So that's actually what needs to be taken care of next. So let's simplify that numerator first. So in our numerator we have 0.25, and we are subtracting from that 0.09. And we get 0.16. So there is 0.16. So in that little example that I kind of talked about, that's our value of A, right? That's our numerator. And similarly, down in our denominator, we can also get a single number down there, which is 0.005 plus 0.1. And that is 0.105. So 0.105. Okay, so now we're ready for our final step, which is going to be to divide right over here. So once again, the trick was, guys, if you remember, we did not actually have these blue parentheses here. And once we get to this step, when we're looking down the order of operations, we get to divide before we get to addition and subtraction. So we'll want to think, oh, we need to divide. But as I made that note earlier, in order to divide, you need to have a single number value over a single number value. All right, so in other words, you need to simplify this numerator and denominator first, right? And we do that by showing them in parentheses to say, hey, this subtraction will result in a single number value. So we need to perform that subtraction first. So let's go ahead and divide our two values here to come up with our final answer. So we have 0.16 divided by 0.105, and that is equal to the following: 1.5238095, so on and so forth. But remember, the instruction said that in this case we need to round to the nearest hundredths spot. All right, so remember, to the left of our decimal here, this is our ones spot. And then once we go to the right of the decimal, this is our tenths spot. And here, this 2 is our hundredths spot. So we need to look one more spot to the right at your thousandths spot and see what its value is. If it is less than 5, then we do not round our hundredths spot any higher. It stays as it is. So in this case, we are just going to keep it at 1.52. Had this thousandths spot been a 5 or larger, so a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, or a 9, we would have then rounded this 2 in our hundredths spot up to a 3. But again, in this case, our thousandths spot was below 5, so we do not round up. So we have 1.52. and 1.52 in this case is going to be your final answer.